Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you for joining us. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today I'm here with Chris Rawlings of JudoLaunch. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Hall. I'm really stoked to be here with you.
Great. So tell us about your background before joining JudoLaunch. What did you do before this gig?
Yeah, so I actually spent the first 2 decades of my life in the technical field. I was obsessed with the universe and math and what things are made of and the basic nature of reality and what's at the edge of the universe and what happens if you go beyond that. And all the questions that we ask ourselves as little kids. Never grew out of that and ended up going on to study physics and getting a degree in physics. And then once I was thrust out into the real world, after I graduated holding this degree, I started working in the solar industry. And I realized, looking at folks that were 10, 20 years down the path, that if I was to control my own destiny in life, I really had to learn the art of business. And more specifically, the art of organizing a group of people to solve a challenge. And so, I had this kind of quarter life crisis or realization that that was the best way or the most essential skill set for me to have impact and for me to have my life have impact. And so I had to make a choice between am I just going to try to solve equations and make some grand discovery that allows me to put my brick in the wall of human knowledge? Or can I make more of an impact by solving problems through human organizations, i.e., business, and i.e., the startups? So that's what originally thrust me into the business realm. And one thing that I found out very quickly is that I learned that a missing component that I had, because it's pounded into you when you learn any kind of science or study any kind of science field, is the art of thinking from first principles. And I say this only because I think it's something that I don't hear very much in podcasts and content in a sphere, but it really allowed me to do things that other people weren't doing, because I think the way most people learn is by learning from analogy, by looking at what other people do. So I took that and actually left the solar industry and went to start my own business. And the business that I started was a direct-to-consumer brand in the health and personal care space for posture improvement and spinal alignment and spinal health products. So I had some experience with this because I was actually in a rock band, a ska band, for a number of years and played over 1,000 live shows and had jacked up my back in the process throughout high school, college, and after college, being in rock and roll bands, playing bass. And a lot of jumping up and down, a lot of hauling heavy amps had given me a severely herniated disc. So I had a lot of experience in spinal health and home treatment of spinal health and spinal decompression and all of this. And so use that experience fused with this attitude of thinking from first principles that I had to make some unique designs of spinal health products that I then sold direct to consumer through e-commerce channels, Amazon being the one generating by far the most volume. And that was actually the synthesis of what led me to begin JudoLaunch.
So from rock band to the SaaS e-commerce space, you took the journey and now you're starting your new company there. So it sounds like you learned quite a bit along the way. For investors in this space, what would be your advice for those who are investing there for the first time? What should they look for?
Well, I'd say so. One thing that I noticed, JudoLaunch, I started in 2017 and we were found by 500 startups and we engaged with them in batch 22. And one thing that I realized when I was there was that e-commerce seems to be somewhat of an unsexy realm in the techosphere, sort of, for some reason, which doesn't make sense to me because when you look at the numbers, you find something pretty profound. So e-commerce right now is only 10% of total retail, 1/10, which, to me is mind boggling because when I look at my own behavior and I look at the behavior of a generation below me, my younger brother's generation, he's in his early 20s. I don't think that he sets foot in a store. I don't think any generation XYZ, whatever we want to call them, thinks about physical stores when they think about getting products. Yet it's still only 10% of total retail. And we're talking retail here, like global retail. That's like, we're talking trillions, not billions. So the fact that it's still only 10%, and I believe that it's going to 90% and beyond, tells you that we're still in day one. And even though the tech sphere and VCs have already moved on to VR and AI, blockchain, whatever the new hot, sexy, quote unquote, investment is, investing in e-commerce and specifically, what JudoLaunch is, which is the infrastructure supporting this shift from physical to digital retail, this is the right time. And there's that old, investment adage that being too early is the same as being wrong. I would say, although many of your investor peers may poo-poo e-commerce investments and e-commerce SaaS investments as so 2009 or something, that this is actually the prime time. E-commerce is just coming out of its toddler phase and into its teenage years, and this is the time to invest.
Well, it seems like the industry is evolving very rapidly right now. There's a lot of move in the direct-to-consumer and other spaces which your space supports. So how do you see the industry evolving in the next 5-10 years, in these teenage years, as you call it? What kind of growth rate are you looking at for the sector, and how many companies are in it? Can you describe it a little bit more as to what we're going to see in the next few years?
Yeah, well, I can say from my perspective, and just to give listeners an understanding of where I'm coming from and why I have a perspective, JudoLaunch helps companies succeed on the Amazon platform. So we're really focused on e-commerce companies that utilize massive online marketplaces like Amazon, like Walmart, eBay, Jet, to get distribution and to get traction online. So we've seen hundreds of companies come through our ecosystem, and therefore have spotted a lot of patterns in that more and more a new brand will arise and think e-commerce first or e-commerce only, not as a supplement to physical retail. And that's because when you do look at the direct-to-consumer market, it's so much easier now than it was, say, 5 years ago, to be able to get traction when you have Instagram influencers that can back your brand. You have a massive online marketplaces like Amazon where you have access to hundreds of millions of consumers, and there's no barrier to entry there like there was in the old school way of doing things, where there are certain gatekeepers that you need to have the right relationships with in order to get the retail or distribution deals that you need to succeed. Now it's kind of anyone's game, and it sort of leveled the playing field. And that's why you see such unique and cool brands coming out of nowhere and really gaining traction. And we have so much of a better variety of options as consumers, because we have Allbirds shoes has the ability to gain traction. You can use Dr. Bronner's shampoo. And that's because of the fact that the playing field has been leveled because of these tools like Amazon.
Well, it seems like everything's moving online and the growth rates are double or not triple digit at this point. And of course, you're supporting all of that growth. So it seems like your space would be growing quite well also. And so how many companies are engaged at the infrastructure level like you guys?
Yeah, so for us, there is a whole ecosystem of companies like ours that help brands and help companies to establish their e-commerce presence and to give them the tools to succeed on massive online marketplaces like Amazon. And that's essentially what we do. We're a suite of tools that help companies succeed on the Amazon marketplace. Amazon gives you the battlefield for brands to go out and battle it out. We give you the sword and the shield so that you have the X factor to win. So, and there's a whole ecosystem of companies that do this, but it's so early days now because this is kind of the next level of e-commerce's maturity, the infrastructure play. It's the infrastructure to allow these brands that are so new and exciting to be able to succeed, giving them the tools to succeed on these platforms. And you see the same pattern playing out in any marketplace. You saw the same thing in the app space. 5 years ago, 10 years ago. This is now playing out, but on a much, much grander scale, because now we're talking volumes. If you just look at Amazon's US marketplace revenue last year, is $250 billion, which is up, by the way, from when I started selling with my brand on the marketplace in 2015. It was 70 billion, just over 70 billion. So 70 to 250, in just a couple of years. That's not linear growth, that's exponential growth. So the numbers we're talking are huge. The growth rate is drastic and exponential, not linear. And the space is very mature. So when you look at the competitive landscape, you have sort of college dorm room coded solutions that are janky and buggy, but despite all that, get massive adoption. And you have a ton of agencies, and I see every day another agency I used to work for Amazon, now I know how it works, pay me $200 an hour to teach you how it works. So it's really fractured, and it's just now evolving. And we have the front row seat to be able to see this market kind of consolidate in real time as it plays out. But it's still in its infancy.
So for investors in the SaaS e-commerce space, those who want to invest in those type of companies, what do they look for a successful SaaS e-commerce company? In some spaces, they look at the customer acquisition cost and the lifetime values and so forth. Is that the same here, or do they look at different metrics?
Yeah, no, I would say it's the same stuff. You're looking at your CAC, your LTV, and your standard SaaS metrics to see if this is something that is proven repeatable and scalable. I would say in this case, and this may be the case with other verticals as well, but the most important thing to me is the actual value being delivered, because it's pretty cut and dry, pretty quantitative. Like you can see, okay, is this tool or service actually having an impact on the merchant's ability to succeed on Amazon? Did the merchant increase their daily volume, or did they increase their impressions, or did they increase their ability to forecast their inventory since utilizing this set of tools? It's pretty cut and dry, because these, like I said, it's like a battlefield. These merchants are out in the battlefield that Amazon has laid out for them, and they're either going to succeed or they're going to fail. It's kind of dog eat dog, real world results that we're talking here.
So to build a successful SaaS e-commerce company, what are the challenges that you face? Regulatory, technical, otherwise? What do you work on every day to grow your company?
So in this space, one of the biggest challenges is, so this is an ecosystem that's built within the umbrella of another ecosystem. So for companies like ours that are helping other companies to succeed on these massive online marketplaces, you need to constantly keep up with the changes of their terms of service, of their API, of their algorithm changes, and everything else. So speed becomes the most important function, and ability to adapt and be flexible becomes like one of the most important elements here, because the companies need to comply, make sure they're providing tools in a compliant way, and that they're not utilizing any kind of black hat strategies or anything in a gray area. Yet they need to make sure that they're giving the best possible sort of X factor component to the companies that they're helping and that we're helping.
So how does JudoLaunch fit into this landscape? What exactly do you do?
So we provide a set of tools and services that help merchants succeed on Amazon. In the future, this will be expanded to other massive online marketplaces too. So we're not trying to be the distribution channel. We're not trying to create another marketplace. We're not trying to create a Shopify, say, to give merchants the ability to sell themselves online. All that's been done. This is another layer in between those levels that is the tool set that helps merchants succeed. So we help them to automate their paid advertising on Amazon, which is, again, a huge exponentially growing vertical. Amazon is third after Facebook and Google in terms of ad revenue on the internet, and they're fast catching up. And it's a priority for them. It was their fastest growing division last year. So helping companies to advertise successfully, We help them with their organic visibility and help them with their ranking, their in-marketplace SEO and listing optimization. We give them the tools to succeed on this marketplace because Amazon doesn't give it to you. They lay out the battlefield and they let you battle it out. We give them the tools to succeed.
So it sounds like JudoLaunch supports e-commerce companies working in the Amazon world, and it sounds like you're saving them a lot of time and money. How much time and money do you save a startup in this space, taking care of all the moving parts that are going on inside this world?
Yeah, well, you get at actually an interesting point, which traces back to the synthesis of JudoLaunch, which is sellers on these marketplaces get together in communities to share their own resources with one another. There are Facebook communities, there's tons of Reddit threads, there are private masterminds and small conferences around the world where sellers get together and share their own ad hoc tools, their own ad hoc strategies, and their own ad hoc tactics. And there's so much duplication of effort there. So there'll be thousands of different sellers building their own solution to XYZ problem because there's no really good solution out there that set the gold standard to help these sellers succeed and to help them solve the problems that they regularly encounter on the marketplace. So whether it's their listing optimization, their ability to organically rank, their ability to wrangle the Amazon advertising platform, there's an enormous amount of inefficiency there because it's such a new and emerging space that there hasn't been a player to come in and set that gold standard there. So it's hard to quantify because there are so many problems that these folks are encountering. But at the end of the day, I like to make the analogy for us, it's the analogy to HubSpot. Like when we migrated our company's website marketing to HubSpot, we dumped a bunch of other tools. We dumped MailChimp, we dumped Lead Pages, we dumped Intercom, we dumped ProsperWorks or CRM. We dumped all these tools to migrate to HubSpot because inside HubSpot's ecosystem, all these tools spoke to one another. And that's what we were trying to build, the tool set that any merchant can come and use to give them an edge and allow them to succeed on the marketplace, and a suite of tools that build on one another and speak to one another, and network effects take play to make the entire suite more valuable than any tool alone, because they all speak to one another, they all feed off one another. And once you're in, it's really a network like that, it's really hard to leave. Like if someone said, okay, HubSpot is going to be 10 times more expensive for you starting next month, I'd be like, okay, there's nothing I can do about that. I can't leave now. Everything talks to everything else. So now I can't leave.
So yeah, everything's interconnected and intertwined, but that's how technology works. So how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
So they can email me directly at chris@judolaunch.com or check out judolaunch.com or our angel list link that should be in the show notes there.
Great. We'll put that in the show notes as well. And thank you for sharing this information. I hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Thank you, Hall. It's been a pleasure.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.